Hello, welcome to HKDI Master Lecture Series, Autumn 2021. I am Leo Chen, Program Leader of Event and Exhibition Design in HKDI, and the moderator of today's lectures. Our topic for today is very mundane. It's about food, the foundation of everyday life. We've invited 3 Greek speakers to inspire us to rethink and explore the possibility of food and our relationship with food through design. So the theme for today is food, non-food. After 2 successful lecture sessions, there will be a panel discussion among all speakers. For time management, please feel free to leave your question on Zoom video webinar or Facebook Live, which we could share with speakers after the lecture and get back to you. Okay, without further ado, let me introduce and welcome the first speaker, Ms. Marije Vogelzang, Head of Food Department of Design Academic Eindhoven in Netherlands. Ms. Vogelzang, please.
Hello, my name is Marije Vogelzang. I am a designer from the Netherlands. And I've been working on food and design for over 22 years now. I studied at the Design Academy in Eindhoven. I studied industrial or product design. And when I was a student, I was wondering, do we really need more things? Do we need more stuff that eventually ends up to become waste? So I started working with food. And at the time, that didn't really exist yet. So I really had to invent a way to work with food. And initially people told me, hey, you're a designer, you're working with food, you're a food designer. And I was wondering if that was really true, because I think food is already perfectly designed by nature. I don't necessarily need to redesign food. But what I do believe is that it's very interesting to look at the verb of eating. You know, what is food anyway? Is a plant that's just growing somewhere alongside the road, is that food? Or is food only food if you eat it? Because if you grow something, let's say a lettuce, and you've got the lettuce on your plate, but you stop eating right before you start eating that lettuce, is then the lettuce food? Because if you're not eating it, the lettuce becomes waste, right? And maybe lettuce can be a decoration as well. So it doesn't have to be food. And if you would say that food is only food when you eat it, when you put it in your mouth and swallow it, that means that food can only become food when there's a human being involved to eat that food. And if you see it like that, then you start to understand that when you're a designer working with food, you also need to deal with this eating human being. So I am very interested in the act of eating. This is where a plant becomes food or an animal becomes food. The act of eating is involving both food, organic material, and an eating human being. And this eating human being is not just a machine or a robot that you can put food in and output comes out. An eating human being is a completely irrational, emotional, sensorial being, animal. And knowing that and using design to engage people in the act of eating, it's very important to see what the eating human being, with all of its emotions and sensorial experiences, can really do with food. And that's a lot more than only making pretty food, because I think pretty food is pretty boring. And of course, aesthetics are important, because you need aesthetics to communicate with the person who's eating your food. So of course, the way it looks is important, but I think what is more important is to create food that has meaning for people, that help people to see the world in a different way or experience the world in a different way. And I think aesthetics are just a part of that. So let me just share my screen and show you a little bit of what I mean. Here are some of the examples that I've been doing in my work as a food designer or eating designer. And you know, this can be very simple. Sometimes you don't even need to change the food itself. So what you see here is a project I did for the Historical Museum. And oh, by the way, this is not the start. Sorry, I was getting confused. All right, this is the start. That was just a little teaser. So eating design. Design from the verb to eat, because food is only food if it's eaten by human beings. So don't just look at food. If no one eats it, it's not food anyway. Look at what happens in the interaction when people start eating that food. So a long, long time ago, I was a student at the Design Academy in Eindhoven, not really knowing what I wanted to do, but knowing that I was very interested in food. And so we got this assignment to do something with the color white. And while everybody was looking at this color, looking at various materials, I just opened the cupboards in my kitchen and I was thinking about food. And at the same time, I was thinking about the meaning of the color white, because I had heard that in some cultures, and maybe in yours as well, white is the color of death. And in Western society, the color of death is black. And I was imagining how beautiful I find white as a mourning color. So I was imagining how a funeral could be if suddenly everything was white. And you need to know that we in the Netherlands, we don't really have any rituals when it comes to a funeral. I mean, we have some, but we don't really involve a lot of food. So I was looking into different cultures and in different ways that people deal with burials. And I noticed that food was very important and it played a really big role. And I was getting a little bit jealous because I thought how sad that in the Netherlands, we don't really have a food culture. So what I did is I collected lots of white food together and I created this white funeral dinner. And this was a moment where people would eat together and feel the loss and sadness together, but also would share food together. And you would do this with your hands. And what I noticed is that white food actually combines really well together. It's very subtle, but it's also kind of bitter and sharp and neutral as well. And those flavors together symbolically really represent the loss of a loved one for me. So you need to know I'm not a chef. I wasn't trained to be a chef. I always collaborate with chefs, but I just started with food in a very, very simple way for me to understand what kind of things can I find in food that people normally don't really see. And I think actually there are a lot of things that we don't see with food, because food is something so ingrained in our culture that we take food for granted. Unless we don't have it, then we really start to appreciate food. But when food is there, we can't even really see it. We just take it and eat it and put it inside of us. And then we talk about whether it's tasty or maybe whether it makes you fat or whether it's sustainable. And these are important things, but they're not the only things about food. So another project I did was a couple of years later, I was asked to do a Christmas dinner. And Christmases are very important when it comes to food in Europe. And so I was thinking, like, what could I do with a Christmas dinner? Because Christmases, in many cases, are already really defined. So you have decoration and you have lots of food and very specific Christmas food. And it's really so full of cliches that first I didn't really know what to do with that. But then I thought, well, Christmas in essence is just about being together and sharing food together. That's it. So I made a very simple intervention, because normally when you have a table, the tablecloth goes down to the floor. And now I took it up into the air and I made some slits in it. So what happened was this setup, and this was a dinner for 40 people that didn't know each other. So these were 40 strangers. And you know, it's kind of uncomfortable, right? When you don't know each other and when you go and sit at the table together. And maybe this setup is even a little bit more uncomfortable because you look kind of silly with only a head and your hands sticking out of the tablecloth. But on the other hand, being in this situation also makes everybody very equal. And you also feel connected because physically you are connected. When I move here, you can feel it there. So everybody feels that they're in this one all-encompassing situation. So, and this is when you need to go to the bathroom and you look at all the backs. The first one was in Amsterdam. The second one, this one was in Tokyo, where I was also very curious about how people would behave, because I was scared that people wouldn't actually join this setting. But what happened in Japan was that people would behave very formal when they entered the space, especially since no one really knew each other. But the moment people would go and sit down, put their heads through the tablecloth, it was just as if their masks were falling off. And people were becoming very open, very friendly, very expressive, and very communicative. It was a really distinct change in behavior. So you can see that it's about the food, but the food is very simple, because you can see that the lady you see here in front of her, she has a plate, and the plate is cut in two. And she has melon on her plate, and everybody in front of her has the same melon. Everybody on the opposite side of the table has raw ham. Raw ham and melon is a classical Italian combination. Most people know that they belong together. So people just start to share their food and create the dish together. And so you don't need to tell people what to do. They start this exchange naturally. So the main course was very similar. The first person would get a huge pumpkin stuffed with seeds and nuts and everything. The next person would get in front of him or her a huge piece of rib from the oven. The next person would get a whole lettuce. The lettuce would be clean and would have dressing and croutons on top, but it would still be whole. Then the next person would get potatoes. And of course, people in Japan know all about sharing food at the table, and you do probably as well. But then having those huge pieces really required people to go and cut up the food and then start sharing and interacting and making a big mess. So what happened was that people had to interact because they needed to share their food, but nobody would tell them to do that, because people are social animals by default. People love communicating through food. People love sharing food, and people do love interacting if they feel safe for doing so. So after a while, we didn't really need this tablecloth anymore. We just could cut it open and let it fall, because then the connection was made naturally. So talking about food, I think, is a topic that addresses almost everything in the world. So when you work with food, you also work with agriculture. When you work with food, you work with psychology, with identity, you work with religious rituals, you work with health and sustainability, with food waste, with pollution, with industry, with politics. There are so many topics, and all of them are related to food. So food in itself is the most simple and most mundane object, because our topic, it's just one single bite. It's a daily, regular, domestic thing. But it's also the most complex and most varied topic in the world. It is the biggest industry on the planet, and it is simply the thing that we need to survive, right? So food, when I look at food in a supermarket, I think it's very interesting because it tells us a lot about politics, about agriculture, about human behavior, about psychology. All these things we can actually find back in something as mundane as the supermarket. And something what I find fascinating in the supermarket nowadays is this thing that's especially in the Western world, it's growing very fast. But I also know that in Asia, there's a lot of these kind of things happening as well. And there's a large tradition in Buddhism making faked meat, right? So we have, in supermarkets, we have this aisle of real meat. So there's burgers and mince and sausages and whatever you've got in original meat, you've got it there. But now in the last years, you can see that there's this growing aisle of vegetarian alternatives. So many times these are soy-based products, and they are copying the real product. So there is also minced and burgers and sausages and fillets and everything that you find in the meat section, you can also find it in the fake meat section. And in essence, I think that's a great thing, because if you do not want to eat meat because maybe you want to eat a more sustainable diet, for example, then it's great that there are alternatives that you can use to make the same kind of dishes that you used to make, but to transform or to transfer your diet to a more sustainable diet by becoming a vegetarian, for example. The only problematic thing with this, I find, is that if you would consider meat the original, and you're producing something which is a copy, then the copy is always inferior to the original. The copy is always something that you start to compare with the real thing. In this case, the real thing would be meat, and would always be inferior. And I think this is problematic, because actually being a vegetarian is really good for the world, for our planet. Eating less meat is a positive thing. But when you choose something that is actually inferior, you always feel that you're not really getting something valuable. So if you have like a real Van Gogh painting and you get the copy of it, it's a copy, it's not the original. Especially with supermarket meat, I think that's interesting, because mostly supermarket meat, if you consider that an original, I'm not sure if you would really call that superior, because many times these animals had really horrible lives. So if that would be superior to a plant-based product, that it's also more sustainable for the planet, then maybe this plant-based product, that should be the superior product. But since you start comparing them and you continue to compare them, there's no way that you can make that a superior product. So if we start to create a new narrative around these products, then maybe we can create a superior product. What I did is I designed 4 fantasy animals. And these fantasy animals, they have their own lifestyle, their own habitat, and their own diet that make them into vegetarian products. So, for example, the first one is called the Ponti. The Ponti is about this big, and it is a rodent kind of animal, and it lives in empty volcanoes where it feeds itself on the ashes of the volcanoes. And because it eats the ashes of the volcano, the meat of this animal is delicately smoked. So it's a great party snack because if you pick it up by the tail, you can keep your hands clean to eat it. The reason why it has such a kind of firm tail is because it needs to make these little burrows in these hard magma layers of the volcano to make a little nest. So because of that, it has this firm tail, and that makes it the perfect party snack. Then there is the herbast, and the herbast is about this big. And this is a square-shaped animal that lives in southern France, where it runs through these herbal fields, and it needs to be careful not to be eaten by predators. So it sits still in the middle of all these herbs, and it needs to have a camouflage fur. So it is sitting still, and it has these herbs growing all on top of the fur. And because it has these herb fur, the stir-fried chops that you can get from the herbast are already pre-seasoned. So you can just put them in your stir-fry pan, and you don't have to add any seasoning. And this is also a square-shaped animal, which makes it really easy and convenient for packaging and transport. And even at the table, everybody will get an equal share. So it's kind of a pacifist meat. Then there is the bikyo. The bikyo is a vegetarian fish, and it lives in the shallow waters of Japan, where it feeds itself on the seaweed that grows there. And because it eats such an abundance of seaweed, it has a really high level of antioxidants. And the real connoisseur can see that because it has these delicate green stripes in its fish meat. So that refers to this high level of antioxidants. And also aesthetically, it's very useful for sushi and sashimi purposes, for example. The last one is the bikyo, which is a vegetarian bird living in the maple trees in Canada. And there it feeds itself on the sap of the trees. And because it eats like the sweet maple syrup, it's a very sweet kind of meat. And it's a dessert meat, so it's very suitable to combine that with ice cream and chocolate, for example. So these objects that you saw here were prototypes. We make them from marzipan, which is very easy to create prototypes with. But sometimes I also collaborate with a real producer of this vegetarian product. And then we do a Ponti party. So then we will be grilling these vegetarian rodent-like animals that live in volcanoes. So we also smoke them, so they get the smoky flavor. And then we make the tail from this Italian breadsticks, which is this very hard grissini-like breadsticks. Yeah, so food and design can be about lots of different things, and sometimes it can be incredibly simple. One of the projects that is very dear for me that I did a while ago is a project that I did at the Historical Museum in Rotterdam. And you might not know it, but the city of Rotterdam is the second city of the Netherlands after Amsterdam. And the city has been severely bombed during the Second World War. And after this bombardment, there was a food shortage and a very harsh winter. And people call this time the hunger winter. So many people died of starvation. And so the museum, they made an exhibition about this time, and they asked me to make food for it. So I went to the Resistance Museum and I got some beautifully handwritten recipes from that time. And I just recreated these recipes because I wanted people to just taste what it was like, what people were eating back then. But what I didn't realize is that many of the people who were there were actually children during the war. And by eating this food, they were putting the food in their mouth. They were tasting it. They were swallowing the food. And maybe the food went down to their belly. But what really happened was that they were opening locks in their brain to release memories of that time. Suddenly, many of these people, in their mind, they simply remembered being in the kitchen with their mothers and fathers still alive, eating this specific food. And this is something, it's called the Proust effect. It's something that I think most of you know, that sometimes when you smell something or taste something, you can get back memories that you didn't even know that you had just by eating something. And the French writer Marcel Proust is one of the people that wrote about this experience. And for me, that makes me very grateful, knowing that when you work with food as a designer, there are so many things that you can do in the world. There's so many projects that you can make. You can make wonderful design chairs. You can make amazing objects. But for me to create something that is so emotional that it can enter your body, that it can become part of your body, but that it can also open up memories that you didn't even know you had, I think that really creates the magic of food. Because in this world, so many people are looking at screens and touching digital devices that we kind of get lost in our connection with food. We don't even know where food comes from anymore. We don't know how it's really been made or how it's being grown. But I do believe that these moments during the day that we do get this connection with this organic material that we put in our bodies, I think this is the magical moment in our life. Because during our day, we actually kind of seem to neglect our bodies, right? We're watching a screen. We are mostly using our eyes with everything that we do, and we're touching objects. But we are kind of neglecting all our senses. We're neglecting that we actually do have a full body of senses. And the moment that we eat, we can activate these senses again. We can activate the connection to the living world again, stepping outside of the digital. And I think this is a very valuable thing for designers to understand, because if you're a designer making objects or products or digital media, for example, then it's a very clear thing you're doing. You know exactly what you will do to the material so that in the end that you have a final product, right? But when you're working with food, it does require a different attitude. It requires for you to take the food or take the organic material, the living thing. And what happens then is not that you put your design power onto it and there's a finished product, because food will decay over time. Food will be eaten by someone. Food has a cycle. It will disintegrate and then it can nourish the soil and it can grow back again. And that really requires a profoundly different attitude of you as a designer, because I think when you're working with a living cycle or a living system or with something just as food, you have to let go of the arrogance of being a designer, because you are subject to that whole cycle. It's never really done. And it has a lot more meaning to the person who engages with it than something that's not living. Because suddenly, if you have to deal with something like food, for example, as a consumer, you also need to open yourself up to it. Because if you eat something that's poisonous, for example, it can kill you, right? So food is so much more intimate, so much more emotional, so much more connected to all aspects of life. that when you're a designer dealing with food, you have to be aware that you're also dealing with the magic. So in a way, you are the magician, but you're also the person who is subject to the magic, because it's actually the food itself that's the magician. So when you're dealing with food as a designer, you simply have the ability to change the world, considering that most pressing issues in the world nowadays are all connected to food. Think about climate change, think about the fresh water supply, think about obesity, think about even mental health, think about migration streams, think about pollinator decline. And this is kind of an endless list of plastic waste and all these things, ocean pollution. If you think about all these things and knowing that you don't have to solve all of that as a designer, but you can help to create alternatives so we start to value food in a new way again, then you're actually addressing something which is the essence of life, which is how we as human beings connect ourselves through food. And this is the power that you have as a creative working with food. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I know it's very short and I have lots more to tell you, and I hope I get a chance another time to speak with you about that. Have a great day. Oh, and I know there are questions later on, so see you later as well.
Okay, thank you, Marine. Our next lecture, or better call it performance, will be conducted by Honey and Bunny, a transdisciplinary studio based in Austria. Please let me to welcome its co-founder, Mr. Martin Hablesreiter. Hello, Martin. Okay, it's time for you.
Hi. I'm really sorry that I'm alone, but one of our sons is in hospital and Sonja is with him. Can you see me? Because here I can see that my internet is unstable. Is it okay for you?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Okay, I will start my presentation right now. Takes a little bit. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. My name is Martin. I'm 50% of Honey and Bunny, and please do not ask later on why we choose the name Honey and Bunny. It was a joke. So we studied architecture, and around 2000 we started to do research on food, and we started to do projects on food, and maybe we start with a short video here. So let's try to find out what we await for the next hour. So when we studied architecture, we have learned that we have to do, or that design or architecture means basically research, 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 and finally, don't give a fuck. So whenever we have time, we do research. Normally, we try to find out what other people are not interested in. We want to find out where are the origins of our daily culture, and what is more daily, what is more important in a way than food and eating. So, I mean, we can think that a mobile phone or a car or a chair is the most important design object, but actually it isn't. It's food. So food contains everything in a way. Food contains emotions, food contains functions, food contains history, a lot of history, and it's the origin of design in a way, because if you do not design food, you could not live in cities, like in Hong Kong, for example. I mean, Hong Kong is a super dense place, And without a very, very organized and very designed food system, Hong Kong would not be able to survive at all, or Vienna or whatever. I mean, I'm living in the Northern Hemisphere, and we have very strong winters. So without the idea of preservation, for example, we cannot survive. So, and basically, and finally, food is an enormous, or has an enormous importance concerning the culture we live in. So whenever you eat, whenever you buy, whenever you cook, you symbolize, you represent who you are. You represent your social background, your gender, your geographical background. You represent your political opinion. You represent if you're vegan or omnivore, or if you are Chinese or Indian or European. You present your age in a way. You present that you are against something, or that you support something. And whenever you do something like that, I mean, you are fully a member of a cultural idea. Okay, and that's basically what this video shows, that we have to dig out, in a way, we have to excavate the origins of what we eat. And that's actually what I want to do right now. As I've told you, I mean, that's the final color circle. I will start with a lecture about what we call food design. So I will define, in a way, the basic design parameters of food design. And if you ask, why should we need food design? Why should we ask about that? Go to a supermarket and count the products, and you will find out that they have more than 10,000 different products in a supermarket. I mean, that's ridiculous in a way. But on the other hand, I mean, it shows our consumer culture, our daily consumer culture. And just to inform you that normally, between 5,000 and 10,000 new products appear every year, edible products appear every year on the international food market. That's enormous. We have almost every day new developments in restaurants, in canteens, at farms, wherever. So there is a lot of creativity behind the food systems. And there is a lot of cultural background. What you see here is Japanese, and that's for us, it's a really important example of food design, because you see very, very beautiful shapes and very beautiful colors. It's called wagashi, and all of them taste the same. But each wagashi contains a symbolic message. So there is a philosophical idea behind all these objects. I could explain that later if you want, but it's really interesting that you think what you eat, and that's very important. As I've told you, we are not in the forests anymore. We do not eat nature, so not at all. Maybe sometimes we eat some fruits we find in the forest, like blueberries in Europe, or raspberries, but that's basically it. I mean, we don't eat any nature. We redesign everything we find. So every plant we eat, every animal we eat is completely redesigned by human beings. And then we use recipes, methods, whatever, to create new foods out of that. And that's finally what it is. Basically, we could survive like that. I mean, it would be possible to say, okay, 3 times a day we take that, but we would not survive, not because of nutrition. It's just because of our will of life. We need to eat. So without the idea of eating, without the feeling of eating, we lose any will to survive. That's actually a problem for people who have problems with swallowing, for example, because of different sicknesses or whatever. So these people sometimes decide to commit suicide because they don't feel any form of eating anymore. So it's a very substantial element of our life to feel 3 times a day that we eat something. Okay, let's come back to the idea of food design. So we decided that we separate food design into 3 basic design parameters. The first one are is emotions, then we have the functions, as you know, as designer, functions are really important, and finally the cultural backgrounds. Let's start with emotions. So normally we think that taste is the most important part of food. Taste on one hand is a philosophical word. It comes from the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, and originally he wanted to justify art with the word taste, and then it came to food in a way. But what we understand as taste right now is what we feel on our tongue or in our mouth, and this is basically just sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. So that's not much, I would say. So our tongue is rather stupid. The nose is much better. The nose can separate 278 different basic substances. So you know that if you have a flu, then you don't taste anything anymore. It's really important for food industries. So almost every smell, every aroma, we take in, we breathe in when we eat is in a way artificial. So whatever you buy in a supermarket, for example, has artificial smells, artificial aromas. That's a very big business. Then we have the idea of optics. I mean, I have to do that very quickly now because, it's just 1 hour. So the color, for example, is really important. Europeans, for example, prefer red colored food. So that's a cultural idea. So Europeans think that red is a symbol of love, that red is a symbol of sweet food, of very, very nice food in a way, like strawberries, etc. So you find a lot of red products on the market. When we did research in Japan, they told us that Japanese, for example, prefer white food because white is a holy color in Japan. So they thought that maybe the white food is the best food in the world. It's culturally, like the shapes we eat. I mean, you know that there are different shapes wherever you come to. It's if you look at, I don't know, fashion design, if you look at the car design, if you look at furniture design, there are massive differences between the cultures. And with food, it's the same thing. I mean, specific cultures prefer specific shapes. The shape you see here is for Europeans not possible in a way. So this was done in Photoshop, and you can't find a shape like that because we think it looks terrible. But it's just what we have in our mind. I mean, it's just what we have learned when we were kids. Then we have the texture. The texture is really important because your mouth is the last guardian before you swallow something. So you feel with your nerves in your mouth if the food is still good or rotten already. That's really, really important. Therefore, 60% of all your emotions you have during eating are because of texture. So whenever you want to design food, please think about texture. That's the most important part of it. So just soft textures in one dish, for example, are disastrous. So we don't like that. So we like combinations of different textures, for example. Even drinks textures. So beer has bubbles inside, or soft drinks, they have bubbles, or we mix coffee with milk to change texture. And this let's say the softer texture of the coffee takes the bitter substances out of the coffee, and then it would be, let's say, more desirable for European tongues, at least. We hear what we eat. So whenever you bite into something, you hear something. That's really important. You hear the temperature, you hear the freshness, you hear even the nutrition value. Therefore, you find acoustic designers for food. And then we come to the idea of function. So we need to transport food, for example. Therefore, people design food in a specific way to staple it on a pallet, maybe, or to hang it on a rope, or like this. I mean, that's the baggie. It's we think that's it was founded for the TV series, the US TV series Sex and the City, but it's really old. It's from the Middle Ages in Europe. And the idea was to hang small pieces of bread on a rope to carry it from place A to place B. We staple it like the fish finger or many other rectangular dishes or recipes. We have to think about where we eat. That's really important. So we don't eat all the time at a dining situation. We don't eat all the time at the table with chairs in the dining room or in a restaurant. We might eat at university, in the train, in the plane, even on mountains we eat sometimes. Therefore, we need to prepare specific food to eat it with your fingers, to keep it warm, or to have kind of isolation material, to combine softer food with let's say edible napkins or edible cutlery or whatever. So there are lots and lots of different ideas, like the pizza, for example. The pizza is meant as a plate originally. So it's perverse in a way to place a plate on a plate like we do today. We have functions like some pasta in Italy work like spoons. So it's for the sauce actually. So that the specific shape of the noodle is designed to bring tomato sauce in it. And then finally we come to this idea of culture. So you see very different shapes of bread, and Europe is, let's say, it's the big bread culture. And you have thousands of different shapes, and each shape has kind of story in it. And that's really interesting. Like the pretzel you see here, it's a very German bread, but it was originally designed as a bread for praying. Nobody knows it anymore. And maybe it comes from this very ancient idea that to eat the heart of the enemy or the brain of the enemy to get wisdom or strength, and still hunters do it sometimes, that they eat the organs of a deer or something in the forest to maybe to get the strength. We have this very funny legend in Austria that there was a siege by the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, 1683. And it said that during this siege, an Austrian baker, Viennese baker, invented the Croissant because the Ottoman Empire had the half moon as their symbol on their flags. Actually, it's not true. It was there already 2,500 years ago. So it was originally a sacrificing bread for the moon goddesses, and then the Christ took it over. Or this plated bread, it's used as a religious symbol. Or the idea, I mean, we've used to live in Japan, and Japanese people asked us, what do you eat in the church? I mean, I'm not a Christian anymore, but I had then the problem that I didn't know. What is the origin of this specific bread Catholics eat in the church? And that's ridiculous. I mean, we eat something and we don't know the origin. So then we did a kind of research and we found out why it's like that. Or the idea of dividing something. I mean, if you go to Vienna and the most famous cake in Vienna is the so-called Sacher cake. You see it on this picture, and normally we divide this cake in a specific way. So we make pieces, like we halve the circle, then we quarter it, etc., etc. And then we went to Japan and we brought a Sacher cake, and they divided it like that. And we were like, how can you do that? Come on, that's absolutely impossible. But why? I mean, what's wrong? And that's interesting. Why should be something wrong? Nothing is wrong or right. It's just a cultural habit. And finally, we have to talk about what we call abstraction. So we have lots of products which do not look like their origins. So fish fingers, for example. The big success of the fish finger is because it doesn't look like fish. So there are many people around the globe who do not eat fish, but they eat fish fingers because it doesn't look like fish. And you have lots of examples, like sausages, like ketchup, like potato chips, whatever. These products are purely abstracted. These are the Picassos of the food design scene, and they are successful. And finally, we have these ideas of creating magic edible or drinkable products. I mean, you might know Red Bull. Red Bull is I mean, it's like 1 espresso and it contains 8 sugar cubes. So it's actually, it's a very sweet drink, which is not that special. But people believe in the stories behind Red Bull, that it makes something with you. And that's just a story, you know, or this yogurt drink. People think it's healthy. It isn't, yeah. Okay, and this is the second one. We call it eat design. So what is eat design? Eat design means that we use a lot of tools, furniture, fashion, rooms, architecture for eating. That's really important. We are surrounded by objects, and these objects are completely different in different cultures. So Chinese people eat completely different than European people, but European people, for example, eat completely different than US people. And we have thousands, but we have lots and lots and lots of different objects for eating, and each of them contains a message. And secondly, whenever we eat, there are a lot of emotions. So just think about your family table, maybe. So if it comes to eating, you find things like patriarchism, you find hierarchies, you find very uncomfortable situations within your family, but you find love. Maybe you find you do your first rendezvous with a sexual partner during a meal in a restaurant or something. You celebrate parties, so you have fun. You might laugh all the time when you eat. So eating is a kind of very, very emotional situation, because you accept, in a way, to lose control. So it's, on one hand, it's good for your body, but on the other hand, so it's very lustful. But on the other hand, maybe because of that, you start to create rules, conditions, traditions, whatever, to control your emotions in a way. So we have lots of table manners all around the globe. We have lots of regulations and rules, how to use chopsticks, how to use different bowls, how to use knife and fork, how to sit on a chair, how to sit on the floor, whatever. And everything is in a way completely nonsense. You know, what are the logical reasons for table manners? There aren't any reasons, but we created it. So that's on one hand, eating is purely emotional, but on the other hand, it's purely cultural. Yeah, I jump over that one. Yeah. And all these objects contain messages. It would be not a problem at all to say, okay, you sit a baby on a piece of metal, but you know that this specific piece of metal is a tablet. And if people are dressed like that, like Sonja and me at this specific photo, you understand that we serve food. So you might think that we are cannibals. We aren't. He's 10 years old. Okay, he's still alive, and he's not the one in the hospital. He's in a very good mood today. So, but it's just symbolic. So what I want to tell you is that every single object you design or you use tells you a story all the time. And whenever you enter a restaurant, you know within a minute what awaits you. You know if the restaurant is expensive, you know if the food is like this or that, if it's European, Chinese, Japanese, whatever, you know, how long you will sit, you know, how you will sit, just because the objects and the spatial designs tell you how it would be. Before you start eating, before you take place, you know exactly what's coming. And that's really interesting. And that's design, by the way. So design is not just handling an object or doing something with an object. It's bringing a narrative, bringing a message into an object. And that's very important. I will come back to this later on. We have lots of different objects, I've told you already. And some of them are really, really funny because we use some tools which are really similar. So we have, for example, we have knives for different usages. We have knives for killing. Yeah. We have knives. They have words then, or I don't know. They have a specific shape. We have knives for cooking. We have knives for eating, and we have knives for an operation table. And we would never mix that up. The function is all the same, all the time. I mean, you cut something, but it's not allowed to use a scalpel, for example, on a dining table. That's completely impossible. And that's what's funny in a way, because if you do mistakes, which aren't mistakes actually, you can irritate people all the time. And that's really cool, because nothing will happen. You know, it's just try it. That's like what I've said at the beginning. Don't give a fuck. Yeah, why not? I mean, why shouldn't we change behavior? If we as designers think that it would be necessary to change behavior, that it would be necessary to use objects in a different way. I mean, we face climate change, we face democratic problems all over the planet, we face a lot of problems in a way. So, but we as designers, we are somehow the superheroes. So we are Hulks or Captain Americas or Batmans or Supermans or Wonder Womans, because we decide how to use objects, and people are defined by objects. So it would not be possible to survive without an object, because it's cold outside, because we need to eat something. And when we start to design food, then we can change it. We just have to overcome, firstly, for ourselves, how to bring new narratives, how to bring new messages into these products. And then we have to explain it to customers, people, organizations, whatever. And that's really important. So we can change. And by the way, it's really necessary to use humor. Otherwise, the world is too serious. Okay, let's come back to the e-design stuff. We need to understand what we are doing. Therefore, we need to know the history. That's research. Where is the knife coming from? I mean, Europe is the only area in the world where people eat with a weapon on the table. I mean, most of people worldwide eat with their fingers. Second, people eat with chopsticks. Third, people eat with forks or maybe spoons. Even in the US, people do not eat with a knife on the table. So they cut their huge steaks into small pieces, and then they lay the knife on the table, change the fork from the left hand to the right hand, and eat. Just Europeans have the weapon, the sword, in their hand all the time. Why? What's the reason? And one of the reasons is, and it's really, really funny in a way, that there was a long-lasting war in Europe. It's called the 30 years lasting war. This was because of the separation of the Christian religion in the 17th century. And after that war, all the swordsmiths, the armory makers, got workless. And it was bloody good that these people got workless because the war was over. But then they decided they need a new business model, and the new business model was cutlery instead of weapons. And this was the moment when it started that everybody had a knife with him or her. But it also contains some, let's say, uncomfortable ideas. So in Europe, at least, it's still common that he divides and shares what she cooked. So the person who divides the meat on the table, who cuts the meat on the table, or the vegetables, or whatever, is the master of ceremony. But it's more than a ceremony. It's the master of who gets what. And he's the big boss. And in most cases, it's him. It's like the man pays the bill in the restaurant. So he has the power. And we have to rethink about that. That's also a designerly issue to say, okay, if we talk about feminism, if we talk about overcoming patriarchism, we have to rethink design objects. The oldest tool we use on the table is the spoon. The spoon is a kind of functional idea, because we are in a way animals, but in comparison to any other animal, we are not a very good animal. So we can't eat liquids and we can't drink liquids in the proper way, like dogs or birds or whatever. So we decided, but human beings decided to create a tool, which is a little bit like a hand. So it's 5,000 years old or something. And finally, the spoon, which is, for my humble opinion, the most intelligent design tool we have on the dining table, is not that important anymore. It's rather as a tool for feeding. So it's for kids or for elderly people or for sick people or something, but it's not for personal eating. So it's strange in a way. Then we have the idea of the glass. I mean, it's the same thing. We can't eat or drink liquids. So we need cups or something. And the cup itself, so the idea of creating a vessel is really old. I mean, it's like the spoon, 4, 5, 6,000 years old. So we don't know exactly. But in many cultures, the vessel or the cup is really, really important. So it's really symbolic. So you might know the story of the Holy Grail Indiana Jones found it a couple of years ago. Or you might know that every 4 years, 11 men from some countries fight on a green grass, on a green field for a cup finally. It's called Soccer World Cup. Yeah, or tennis players, they fight for cups. Yeah. And the glass, as we have it today, by the way, is from Venice. It was invented, the transparent glass was invented at the island of Murano near Venice. And then if we think about what else, I mean, we have porcelain on the table. And there is, for me, there is a big difference between East Asian cultures and European cultures. So European cultures are metal cultures. So we have thousands of different pieces of cutlery, but everything is made out of metal. But the porcelain stuff is not really important. So we have 3 main shapes for the plates, and we don't care that much about plates. We care about cutlery. In East Asia, it's different. So Asian people eat with 1 pair of chopsticks. So the chopsticks are not that important as the cutlery is in Europe. But in Asia, the porcelain is really important. And by the way, the porcelain was one of the major goods which created globalized economical transportation routes, which creates globalization in a way, because after the Renaissance period, the Europeans were completely crazy about porcelain, and it has to be said that it's a very intelligent material. I didn't find any material which is that good as porcelain. And what you see on that picture is that if we start creating a scenery out of different eating tools, like you see it here, you create territories. And it's very impolite to leave the territory. That's quite funny. We have furniture for eating. You might know that when you enter a room and you see chairs or tables, you see it immediately if these chairs are for working or for eating. And that's really strange, isn't it? That, I mean, you can see it within a second if a chair is used for this and that. I mean, it's a chair and it's always the same size. It's just a chair, but you know that this one is for this. But a chair and a table creates a posture. So it fixes your position for the dining period. So you have to sit like this if you're on a chair. This is one of the super strange European traditions, that we are not allowed to move during eating. A dining situation, or all the objects we use, create hierarchy. I mean, we know that, or you think about, where is your father sitting at your personal family dining situation? Is it always the same seat, or does it change? How is the hierarchy defined within your family? And for sure, there is a kind of definition. And on one hand, the dining situation creates a hierarchy, but on the other hand, some people try to avoid these forms of hierarchy. Okay, I'm not interested in this eating community at all. I do something completely differently. That's acceptable. And finally, we have, or not finally, and we have to talk about spaces. I mean, we have big spaces, we have small spaces, but a dining space is a specific space, a space for eating. And for nothing else, there are spaces which are not dedicated for eating. Like that one. I mean, that's right in front of my house here. And you can't imagine, but when we did this photo, somebody passed by and told us that we have to go away because we block a parking space. Wow, really? For what? Anyhow, officially, you are not allowed to do that because this space is dedicated for cars. We have to think about what we wear. So we have to think about which parts of the body should we cover and which ones not. So for example, we have to take the helmet off. No hats. We have to cover our shoulders. And that's everywhere a little bit different, but everywhere you find regulations of what to cover and what not. It's not very comfortable sometimes to eat with a specific costume. Okay, and now I come to something completely different. Sonja and me, we do, let's say, food design or eat design or projects with food since at least 2005. And what we learned from the very beginning was that whenever you deal with food, whenever you work with food, and Marije mentioned it already, you touch people immediately. So you bring people in a situation where they want to interact, where they want to do something, and where they are like, oh, or wow, whatever. But food is very, very special. And in a way, it's the one cultural field, artistic field, designerly field, which is the strongest if you want to touch people. You can't do any kind of interaction like when you work with food. And this was one of our first performances, and it was in a department store in Milan, in Italy. And it was normal opening hours, and nobody of the consumers, of guests of these department stores were informed that we are doing a performance. And trust me, everybody stopped and looked at us. And everybody was in a way very positive. So that's the other thing with food. If you start to deal with food, people are positive. And that's really nice. And secondly, everybody wants to interact. place a piece of chocolate or a piece of cake or whatever somewhere, and everybody wants to touch it. Everybody wants to do something with it. Wow. I mean, who wants to touch a painting on a wall? Who wants to touch a design object on a table? Nobody. I mean, come on, design objects are really boring in a way. What is a designer's chair? But what piece of food? A piece of food is really, really, really something. You know, people want to do something with it. You want to eat it. You want to touch it. You want to smell it. And that's fantastic. And we did a performance years ago, and this was an animal, and we forced people to slaughter this animal in the museum. And actually, we were not sure if people would do that. I mean, in a museum, people are like, ugh. And you can't imagine how they reacted. They celebrated an orgy. Yeah, it was amazing. We were standing there like, we couldn't believe what we saw. And then we understood that food makes something with people immediately. It was a performance we did last year, and it was during an anniversary celebration, a foundation which rescues food for people who need it. And this was in the Museum of Natural History in Vienna, and we did this kind of color circle in the main lobby of the museum during the day before the celebration was, and the normal visitors of the museum passed by. And okay, we have to do that during the day, because everybody who passes by will stop and ask what we do. And then the organization would find some time to talk to people and inform them about the necessity of this organization and the problems we have with the food systems. And it really happened. Everybody stopped, because people are like, wow. I mean, what is it? Vegetables, nothing else. But vegetables are like, wow. You see Marije here in the middle. You can find her. And you can force people to do a lot. So this was a performance in the Austrian city Salzburg, and we sorted our dining table by color, just to let people interact. And it worked. People interacted. So if people were sitting in the white area and they wanted to have something in red, they had to organize them in a way without standing up, and they did. And second, we found out, so this was a very rude performance, so I was very, very unfriendly to our guests, just to find out how people would react. And trust me, if you serve food, you can do absolutely everything with people, and that's bloody cool. That's us on the table. That's in London. It was a similar performance. And this was the only performance that we tried to bring a living room into a museum, and we wanted to exhibit us for one evening. And we had a very negative experience in this case, because people started to get aggressive. We didn't expect that. So that's a very important point. You can't expect what's happening during a food performance or a food installation. And in this specific performance, people reacted in a negative way. So they started to destroy the installation. They started to get aggressive against us. They started to kick us in a way. They started to say bad words, whatever. And we were like, wow, what's going on? But it was really interesting. And you can force people to do something they would never do. And finally, they are happy with it. Okay, next step. Why did I tell you that with this, let's say, fantastic cultural values, fantastic opportunities food provides? This is because we have some major problems, and one of them I already mentioned is the climate change. And what you see here is an exhibition in the Viennese Museum for Applied Arts. And the museum asked us a couple of years ago if we can create a table of the 21st century. What you see here is a row of tables from the collection of the museum, from the Middle Ages to the 21st century. and we are the last ones. And then we say, okay, what is the tableware of the 21st century? And it is trash. It's trash. It's garbage. It's something we throw away all the time. Okay, we have the coffee to go cup. We don't care at all what we use. So each object we have today in our consumer-based culture is there to be thrown away at least within 2 or 3 years. I mean, we have these fucking objects. I mean, they are for 2 years, for 3 years, and then it's like, and that's what we call design. I mean, come on, yeah. That's ridiculous. That's nonsense. And that's really toxic for society and planet. So then we decided, okay, if this is the 21st century, we have to bring all this shit to the museum and we exhibit it. Aluminium cans, plastic cups, whatever. So it's not about porcelain anymore. It's not about, I don't know, Alessi, Philippe Starck, Nathalie Grasset, whatever. So our design culture is trash. And there is an idea behind that. And the idea behind it is that designers basically try to create very profitable products. So the more profitable the product is for the customer, for the client of the designer, the better the designer is finally. I mean, this is one of the most successful, the most innovative products we have in Europe, edible products. This is the Kindersurpresa, and it's very nice because it's an egg, it's Easter, it's blah, 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 and they sell millions of pieces every year. So in an old-fashioned designery way, it's very innovative, it's very good, it's very successful, and it creates a lot of money for the customer. But it's palm oil, so it's burning rainforests. It's aluminium, the packaging. It's plastic. It's slavery, most probably, somewhere on the planet. It's a lot of waste. It's a lot of energy. Basically, it's not a very nice product. So we have to rethink the goals. Secondly, whatever you eat creates your body. That's really important. So we have not a single cell in our body which is older than 7 years. That means we are what we eat. Today, we are industrial design. Okay, we are not nature anymore. We are industrial design because we want to be industrial design because we want to have open supermarkets 24 hours a day with the same range of products all over the year. That's our idea of a good life. But what does it mean? It means an industrialized food system, which provides all over the year the same stuff. Okay. Yeah, but it's our body. The problem is a little bit that with this system, we eat our own future. We eat us in a way. So we don't create us, we eat us. So 30% of emissions which provoke climate change are because of the food production worldwide. 30%. And it would be so easy to change food systems, diets, whatever. We just don't care. I mean, is it really necessary to catch out all the tuna of the Mediterranean Sea, and because the Pacific Ocean is empty already, and fly it around the globe? No, there is not any necessity. Is there a necessity to burn down the rainforests to produce cattle? I don't think so. We just need to rethink these food systems. We have to rethink, what do we eat? And how do we want to eat it? Is it really necessary that a handful globalized companies decide what we eat? That a handful globalized companies decide how we eat, when we eat something, that they control the entire food market. And believe me that artificial meat, for example, would make the situation worse, because then their power is even rising, decreasing, and we step on a way on our food systems. We step on in a way on our farmers. But that means finally that we dance on our own future. So maybe it's a little bit stupid, isn't it? But I mean, oh, sorry. Yeah, that's actually how food culture is at the moment. And it's not only a problem because of climate change. I mean, it's also a problem because of social issues around the globe. So whenever we eat something, I don't know, especially in Europe, maybe the wheat we eat or the rice we eat is coming from places in Africa or South America or wherever, where dictatorships control in a very aggressive way how the food is getting produced. So we are talking about land grabbing, we are talking about slavery. In the southern parts of Europe, we have hundreds of thousands of slaves from Africa who produce our vegetables for nothing. I mean, they don't even get paid in a way. They live in conditions we can't believe. Just because to have a full supermarket. So why do we show you all that stuff? And I mean, yes, I'm 47 years old. You might think, okay, this is the old pessimistic guy. Oh my God, shut up, shut fucking up. I mean, we are not in these pessimistic stories. And I would understand if you react like that. And yes, it's boring. It's boring to hear all the day stories about the apocalypse. Bad stories, blah, blah, blah. You want to design, I want to design, and that's basically it. And that's the cool story now, that as I've said already, we can change the world. And that's really nice. So on one hand, we have to create new design goals. We have to rethink, what do we want to do? What do we want to fulfill? What are the goals of design? Is it just the profit? Is it just the content of this shopping trolley? Or is it everything around it? Do we want to deal with international companies and to wake up finally and find out that they fucked us up at the end and they're getting a lot of profit out of because of us? Or do we create new ideas for better politics, for better ecological conditions, for better human rights, whatever? What do we want to do? And for my opinion, it's first of all, we have to rethink narratives, the stories in the design objects. We have to redefine the goals, and we have the power to create stories and implant these stories into objects, like Marije's fantastic project with these animals, the vegetarian animals. I really love that project because it's exactly it. Change the content, change the narrative, and develop new stories. What are, for example, desirable goals for our society for the future? It doesn't mean that we have to reduce all the time. This is negative, but we can create positive ideas. How can we think about vegetables, for example? How can we increase the values of vegetables? How can we rethink ideas like hygiene, packaging, health, whatever? Marije mentioned it. What means health? For the moment, health means vacuum everything. I mean, yeah, that's health. We are not talking about vitamins. We are talking about pasteurization, really. No, What are the values? Okay, is this the future or should we rethink it? We have to rethink how land and urban spaces, how agraric spaces and urban spaces interact with each other. That's a very big question to architecture, urban planning and design. So how could we cross borders in a way? Because for the moment we have two different worlds in a way. So we have cities and the land, rural regions. And people even don't like each other that much. So the ones think that this is the elite, so the urban people, they have culture, and the land people, they don't have culture, really. I mean, we have to rethink, how can we bring agriculture, how can we bring food production into the cities again? And it's not everything is based on technology. So urban farming or agriponding are not the big solutions. Technology will not save us. These are tools, but not solutions. So we have to understand how we can bring the worlds together again. We have to rethink seasons. We have to rethink the idea of local products. We have to rethink the dining situation. So do we need buffets, for example? Do we need over portions? Do we need food waste on the table? Do we need one plate for each dish? So how can we reduce resources for the dining situation? That's really important. How can we, like Marije did, for example, can we create dishes which reduce the size of portions? Can we create dishes which we can use for many different courses, because every course needs a dishwashing machine for many people? Can we rethink the idea of who serves food? How do we understand democratic situations on the table, etc.? And it's not difficult, actually. It's just like we have to overcome it. I mean, if you see that picture, okay, it seems a little bit strange if you see that. But if you do a photo like this, I mean, what does it mean? Nothing to do it. Just try it to do something differently. Again, I show you this because we did a performance, or this is the second phase of the performance we have done in this museum, and every guest, we had around 200 guests, got a bowl with an ingredient. So we wanted to make people interact during the performance. So some people just got salt or oil or one sort of vegetables like tomatoes or peppers or aubergines, whatever. So people had to find somebody else or some other people with different ingredients. And on the first floor, we had chefs. And these chefs cooked them for the people. So 5, 6 people found each other and said, okay, let's create something together. And trust me, it worked. So they communicated with each other. And that's really cool. That's what food is. It makes people friendly. It makes people talking to each other. It makes people open to new ideas. Again, we have to think about what is our tableware? How can we use it? I have to jump a little bit. What's the time? Ah, yeah, we have. Can we bring the idea of circular economy, of circular design, for example, back to the dining table? How can we use or reuse everything we eat? Can we bring the idea of cradle to cradle to the kitchen, to the eating situation? How can we use it? I'm sorry about the quality. Yeah. And that's basically it from my side. So I've tried to give you a very overview of the work and the research ideas of Honey and Bunny. And I just had 1 hour, which is not that much for 20 years of research. And yeah, thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to hear your questions.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Yes, let's move to the panel discussion, and we connect with Marije as well.
Hello.
Hi, Marije. Hi, Marije. Okay, good. Okay, that's good. So thank you for both of you a very inspiring lecture and performance. Okay, I think that there's a lot of questions from the staff and students, and actually we have received a few questions first. So I will ask the first question on behalf of our students. And the first question is why and how you start to work on food, given that Marije's background is product design, and while Martin is architecture. All right. So may I invite Marije to start first?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's a really good question because it seems very irregular, right, as a choice. But if you consider that if you work with materials as a designer, as a product designer, then food is just one of the choices that you can make. And the moment that you see that as a designer, you always make something for someone, for the user, then before someone can even sit on a chair, the person has to eat, right? So food, if you don't only just look at the object, but if you look at the user of your object, you see that food is the most important thing for the user of your object. So then you can start to consider food as a material. And once you do that, then you can see that you open a whole new world of possibilities, since food is not just a material, as food actually goes inside your body. So it becomes a very exciting and very connected topic.
All right.
I hope that answered the question.
Yes. Okay, how about Martin? What's your opinion on these questions?
Yeah, I think about that in a very similar way. I mean, I have to say that when we moved to food, I mean, this was not the one decision we did. I mean, it came over us in a way. So we studied architecture, we worked, and we opened an office for architecture, and we built actually. But then over the years, we found out how important the idea of food is, and how political and how cultural and how important in the sense of climate change the idea of food is. And yes, I agree totally with Marije that it's the basic substance we have, and we have to discuss that, because I mean, it's not acceptable that somebody else decides what we eat. And I mean, we discuss architecture, we discuss even the design ideas of mobile phones. Why shouldn't we discuss what we eat? I mean, it should be vice versa. Food design should be the most important design idea. It should be way more important than designing chairs. I mean, what is a chair? A chair is not that much important than what we eat. I mean, eating is about health. It's about happiness also, and it's about family or not. and of course it's about nature and climate and pollution, whatever. So we have to discuss that in a public and broader way.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, sure. Yes,
and Martin, I so agree with what you say, because I think it is really important, and I think we're not doing justice to ourselves or our planet if we do not consider food as a serious topic for design. But I also believe that the food industry really needs creative people to start to really contribute to the food chain, because the food chain is filled with people who are doing great jobs, but they do not have the creative capacity to think outside of their position in the food chain. And I think what is really needed is to find people who do have this flexibility of thinking, which is the #1 trait of a good designer, to start to team up and collaborate with farmers, with retailers, with people in logistics, for example, with fishermen, with all these people, to become a bridge between them and to find new ways of dealing with food. Because you can also see that the food system nowadays is really growing against its edges. It's getting serious, and we need creative people there.
Yes, the synergy is very important. Okay, so there's another question. We want to go to Martin first. Can you select one project which you could consider the most challenging so far, and how and why? Martin?
I don't know. I mean, it's actually, first of all, it's always the next project.
All
you
right.
know, I mean, there are basically, at least for us, we have 2 different kinds of projects. So sometimes people ask us to do something which we have already done in a similar way. Then it's easy, because then you know a little bit how you would do that. And then you have these projects where people ask you, or when we decide to do something completely new. These are the more difficult projects, but challenging projects are, on the other hand, I mean, they are very good, because I mean, we prefer the challenging projects, because I mean, on one hand we are nervous, but on the other hand, I mean, it gives you the opportunity to try something, to develop yourself. I mean, just to say that, I mean, the most recent project we did was a performance for a scientific political conference in Austria, and it's considered the most important event for politics and scientists every year. And people did not know that we will perform. So the producers decided that we get half an hour to perform for 500 people before the lectures in this hall start. So it was in a conference hall, and we had to provoke them. And our audience was basically finance people, you know, bankers, insurance people, etc. And they told us that we should provoke them in this case of sustainability. And on one hand, I mean, we knew that this is a very, very strange and difficult audience. But on the other hand, it was a big challenge. But I'm pretty sure that for the next performance, it will be similar. So I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So how about Maria? Do you have any most quick challenging project for you so far?
Well, I have to say, and yes, I agree with Martin. It's always the things you haven't done before that are the most challenging, but also the best ones, because you need to expand and you need to step on new terrain every time. So I think personally as a designer, I think it's always good to try and do new stuff. When I look back, I do remember that when I started working with food and design, which was about 1999, no one knew what food and design was about. So that was kind of hard because I needed to explain what I wanted to do, but I didn't have enough work yet to make a portfolio. And I couldn't really point at other people showing like what kind of things I wanted to do. And I see that that became much easier. I'm so happy to see that now Hong Kong is also food design minded already for a couple of years. Also, when visiting Hong Kong, I noticed that. And I think that is really wonderful to see that now this is a global movement of food and design going on in the world. One of the challenging projects, I would say for me, was a project I did a while ago with Gypsy people, Roma people in Hungary, where I had Roma people feeding strangers and sharing their life stories in a performance. And if you know a little bit about Hungarian social structures, then Roma people are really seriously being rejected. So politically, emotionally, and socially, that was a very, very complex project, but it went really well. And I think that project is a great example of how food and design can really bring something new to the world that brings more connection between people.
Good. Okay. We have also some question in the forum. So we'll check. The first one is the first question on the forum is there a methodology or framework in designing specific with food? How about Maria? You go first.
Yeah, I believe that Martin started his presentation also with sharing already quite a clear framework, which I thought was a great kind of outline of how food and design can be approached. And I believe that there is so many various angles towards food and design, because if you create something, for example, for a hospital with food, it would be a different experience than if you create something to help people who want to understand more about farming, for example. So just as in regular design, I think there are many different kind of fields. For example, there is car design, which requires different skills than if you do fabrics design, for example. So in that sense, I think there's a lot to discover. And also there are a lot of similarities to kind of regular design, in the sense that you always start with curiosity. You start with curiosity and know that you can always collaborate with chefs, with farmers. You can collaborate with people who work in food retail, for example. So you don't need to be a specialist on food to start working with food. And I think that's important, because you are an eating human being, and that already makes you a food specialist, which makes it really easy to start being creative with food.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's like the question how to design something. I mean, nobody knows how to design or how to be creative. I mean, it's like, yeah, you have to create for yourself a list of tasks and a list of wishes, I think, to say, okay, I want to try this and that maybe in this case, but it's a designerly process like any other, and I mean, you need some knowledge, but it's not necessary to be a chef, for example. I mean, an architect doesn't necessarily needs to build a house or a skyscraper by himself or herself. It's her or he needs to know how to do it in a way, but not everything. And yeah, it's also a matter of collaboration. And I think so for us, one important framework for us is to try to understand local conditions. I mean, I could not come to Hong Kong, for example, and do a project with Viennese cuisine. Nobody would understand it. So we would need to find out what food means in Hong Kong, and what is culturally important, which dishes, products, ingredients, rituals are important for this specific place. And then we would try to understand it, and that needs from the very beginning collaboration, because you would not find that in the net maybe. So you need to ask somebody, and then you go deeper into conversations, and then you come to completely new fields, but you never know.
All right. So I think there's another question is about what is the significance of locating food and eating design at the now, since food is existing for so long yet, and food design just emerging perhaps 2 decades before. So anyone would like to answer first?
I'm sorry,
Can I start?
I didn't really catch the first part. Would you mind to repeat the first part of the question?
Okay. What is the significance and evolving food and eating design at the now? Okay, since food has existing for a long time, right? But the food design is just emerging perhaps maybe 20 years ago. So what's your opinion for this questions? Maybe Marije, go first.
Can I start? Sorry, just
okay.
2 sentences. Food design is not a new discipline.
All
it's
right.
just it's just considered to be a new discipline, and there are two. First of all, human beings design food since civilizations exist. So maybe we design food for a way longer period than any other design field. And then, I mean, just to give you one example, I mean, before Coco Chanel, nobody would say that fashion is designed. But it was designed, you know, in the Baroque period, in the Renaissance period, or in the entire history of East Asia, fashion was designed. But these people were called tailors, yeah. and then starting from Paris, starting with Coco Chanel, the design of food got a discipline. Of course, it changed the discipline, but and it was really important to say that this is a design field. You can, but it
I think is it the network.
I think it's frozen.
Okay. So maybe Marije, you continue this question first.
Absolutely. Yes, I think what Martin is saying is very important. I believe that agriculture is already the first act of design of human beings, because since we started to conduct agriculture, we started to interfere with food. So it has been going on since agriculture. And I do believe that now it has become a career choice to start working as a designer with food. But the significance, I believe, is very powerful, because I can see that this is a global movement. And because it is such a mundane topic, like we all eat, and the way we choose to eat on a daily basis is already influences the way our world is working. So if we change our food habits, we also change what the world looks like. And but not just that, we can also change our bodies, but we can also change how we perceive food, or how we value food, or how we even value life through food. So I believe that, yes, food has been around, thank God, otherwise we wouldn't have been here. But I do also believe that what food or eating designers bring can be something very different than just only designing new kinds of food. Even though that is a part of it, I think it goes far beyond that.
Okay, thank you. I see Martin's return. Hi, Martin, do you have any supplement for these questions?
now. Yeah,
Okay.
Zoom collapsed and came back. I don't know why, but
Okay, it's great.
so I didn't hear the last question, or was it? It was the
It's the same.
But I think Marije did it for sure.
All right. Okay. Okay. I think the following question is, I think it should be from students, because students always ask this question. Where did you get your inspiration from your projects? Your inspirations. So, Martin, do you have any advice for the students for these questions?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, at least for us, it's really important to try to get inspiration out of the field. You know that I'm not, or we are not the designers who do research all the time in designer books and magazines and blogs and so on. So actually, for us, it's rather important to see what does the art scene do, what is the theater doing, what is in cinema. How about science? So science for us is really important. So where is the scientific community right now? What are the research fields of the major science disciplines, etc. So and also politics could be could create inspiration. So for me, inspiration is in many cases it's in a way it's negative. So inspiration means a little bit that something is wrong, something is not here, or something would be necessary. I mean, it's like if I mean, just to give you an example, that we did a book about cleaning. This was not about food and eating last year, and this was based on a performance we did. And we did so we went from house to house in a small village in the Alps and asked if we can clean a room. And I cleaned the rooms, and Sonja did interviews with the housewives there. And after 28 houses which we have cleaned and 28 interviews, we knew that there are fundamental lacks in our society concerning female rights and hierarchy. And so we decided, okay, we have to do research on that. So that's what I mean with negative inspiration, that something has to be better. And I'm not talking about I don't know, a better pen, because I think this pen is already very good. So that's not design. It's not a better logo for a global company, and it's not a better packaging for, I don't know, a senseless product. And it's even not a better smartphone, because smartphones are really good. It's about what runs wrong and or what is not there anymore. That's inspirative.
All right, good. Okay, how about Marije? Any advice for this question for students?
Yes, I do, because I think one of the most interesting mindsets that you can have in life is to have the curiosity of a child. And it's nice if you do have children around, because they say things like, for example, my daughter once saw her dad clearing out the Christmas ornaments and decoration, putting it into a box. And she said, where are you going to take that? And he said, well, I'm going to put it in the attic. And she said, oh, will there be another Christmas next year? And for her, it wasn't a given at all that Christmas is an annual festivity. And taking nothing for granted, I believe, is a beautiful way of viewing the world, because I believe that a lot of people have a kind of mundane laziness where we just accept what is and we believe that everything that is, we don't have to think about it anymore. And sometimes if you decide to view the world from the eyes of a child, then you can really be full of wonder about very little things. And for me personally, in my work, I try to be on this level where I try to view the world in this curious way, so that maybe my work is not always even dealing on the level of culture, but it's more below that. It's like pre-culture. It's more through kind of wonder that I believe we can experience food in a kind of playful way that also connects not with my inner child only, but also with the inner children of everybody who's experiencing it. And so that would be, well, that is my tactic, but also is something for you if you're watching this and you want to try it out. Just, you know, question things and don't take anything for granted. And I believe what Martin has been showing today, the way to eat with water guns, for example, or with on very different ways to sit next to the table, those kind of exercises. I think that's a beautiful example of just doing things because you're curious, not because you obey the rules or something, the unspoken rules.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think the time is limited, so we are the last question then. It will be short. The last question is, what is your advice to anyone who would like to start a career, career in food design? So how about, okay, Marije is still here. So Marije, can you go first? Some advice for this, for the people who want to start a food design.
I have a little thing that might be nice, and it's not meant as an advertising, but I am doing online courses on food and design. And actually tomorrow is the last date that you can apply for a free ticket to access this food and design dive. So I'm doing a little contest where I will give 2 seats free away. So you can look at my website to see how you can apply for that. So if you send your stuff today, tomorrow is the last date. I didn't meant to like mention this, but like it could be a start. It's a great course because I've done it now about 4 times, and I am still following everybody up who's done it and all the steps they make after it. I'm not saying it's the only thing to do, but I thought, well, if you want to get your chance for a free ride, then it would be nice, perhaps.
Oh, thank you. This is just a good timing. All right. So, Martin, do you have any advice for the students for this design?
It's really difficult. I mean, it's like, I think everybody should find out her or his strengths, and maybe you can call it talents or whatever, but it's so the biggest advice is, first of all, try to work with people you like. Never collaborate with assholes. And it never works, you know. And do what you want to do. I mean, it's really stupid to work with somebody or to do projects which you're not interested in. I mean, we had the experience in our career that whenever we did projects, when we thought, okay, that's not that nice, or it's just for the money, or stuff like that, it finally turned out that it was bullshit idea. So we didn't get the money we wanted to get, or we had disastrous projects, and we felt very bad by the end. And I mean, it's what it is. I mean, it's creating tips or advices for a good career is really, really difficult and almost impossible, because there are so many circumstances which can influence a career that but I mean, what I have to say, what's maybe the good thing is that when we started around 2000, Marije or Marty or Mark or whatever, or whoever, with the food design thing, it was a kind of curiosity, and I'm pretty sure that food design is getting a serious discipline right now, and it's getting into universities. It's getting more and more a designerly discipline of public interest, and it's maybe a very important discipline. And the more knowledge people collect, the more projects they do right now. I think in 20 years, food design is something like fashion design or furniture design today. So there will be a good future for food design. So I would not suggest to design cars right now, actually, or stuff like that. So food is maybe the better idea.
All right. Thank you, Maria and Martin. And this is really fruitful afternoon. I think it's time for today the lectures. And once again, give a big hand to Maria and Martin, and for thanks for insightful sharing today. Thanks for joining us online today. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.